There is a statistic that corporate psychologists do not like to say out loud. In the general population, about 1 in 100 people is a clinical psychopath. In the corporate executive population, that number jumps to 1 in 25. 4%. 4 times higher than the rate in prisons. Read that sentence again. There are proportionally more psychopaths in the C-suites of major corporations than in maximum security penitentiaries. And that is just psychopathy. When you add in narcissism and Machiavellianism, the other 2 traits of the Dark Triad, the numbers get much darker. Some estimates suggest that up to 20% of senior corporate leadership scores in the elevated range for at least one Dark Triad trait. Meaning, if you work in a mid-sized or large company and you look at the 5 most powerful people above you, at least one of them is almost certainly wearing a mask. And that mask is the reason they got there. By the end of this video, you will understand exactly how the modern workplace does not merely tolerate the Dark Triad. It selects for them. Let me begin with the uncomfortable truth that most career advice books refuse to tell you. The modern corporation is not designed to reward the best person. It is designed to reward the person who is best at appearing to be the best person. Those are 2 very different skills, and the gap between them is where the Dark Triad thrives. Because the average high-performing employee does the following. They focus on the work. They put their head down. They produce results. They assume that visible excellence will be recognized. The Dark Triad employee does something entirely different. They understand, at an instinctive level, that in a large organization, work speaks quietly, politics speak loudly, and the person who controls the narrative around the work, not the person who did the work, is the one who advances. So while the ethical employee is refining the deliverable, the Dark Triad employee is refining the story about the deliverable. While the ethical employee is proving themselves through action, the Dark Triad employee is positioning themselves through relationships. While the ethical employee assumes their manager will notice, the Dark Triad employee is making sure their manager's manager notices first. The result, played out over years, is not that the best worker rises, the best storyteller does. And the best storyteller is almost never the most honest one. Now here is where it gets structural, because a lot of people think the problem is just that some ambitious people are willing to play politics. That is a small part of the story. The much bigger part is that corporate structures themselves are engineered in ways that filter for exactly these traits. Consider what a modern promotion process actually rewards. It rewards confident self-promotion. It rewards the ability to network with senior leaders. It rewards the willingness to take credit for team successes. It rewards decisive language, even in situations of uncertainty. It rewards the ability to remain calm while delivering bad news to junior employees. It rewards a smooth performance in high-visibility meetings. Now, ask yourself, who is best at all of these things? Not the deepest thinker, not the most careful analyst, not the most ethical decision-maker. The person with elevated narcissism is more confident in self-promotion. The person with elevated Machiavellianism is better at strategic networking. The person with elevated psychopathy is calmer under pressure, less bothered by delivering harsh news, more decisive without the burden of self-doubt. The Dark Triad personality is not sneaking past the promotion filter. The promotion filter was, in effect, designed for them. Not deliberately, but structurally. Because the qualities that most corporations measure, presence, executive gravitas, confidence, decisiveness, are exactly the qualities that Dark Triad personalities either possess naturally or perform effortlessly. Meanwhile, the qualities that make someone a genuinely great colleague, humility, careful reflection, willingness to admit uncertainty, deep collaboration, credit sharing, often work against you in performance reviews. The system does not reward what is good. The system rewards what looks impressive in a 15-minute meeting with a senior executive. And nobody looks more impressive in a 15-minute meeting than a dark triad personality. Let me show you what this looks like in practice. Imagine two employees in the same department. Employee A is deeply talented. They deliver excellent work. They are humble about their contributions. They share credit generously. They mentor junior colleagues quietly. They occasionally point out risks that senior leadership does not want to hear. They assume, correctly, that their work is exceptional, and assume, incorrectly, that this alone will be recognized. Employee B is competent but not exceptional. They deliver adequate work. They are constantly visible in cross-functional meetings. They take credit for team wins whenever the opportunity arises. They distance themselves from failures. They cultivate relationships with executives 2 levels above their manager. They speak with certainty even about things they do not fully understand. They never raise inconvenient concerns in senior meetings, only in one-on-ones where they can control the narrative. At the end of 2 years, who gets promoted? You already know. Employee B is now in charge of Employee A, and Employee A cannot understand what happened. They ask themselves, in the quiet hours, whether they should have played the game differently, whether they should have been louder, whether they missed something obvious. They did not miss something. They misunderstood the game. The game was never about being the best worker. It was about being the best perceived worker. And perception in a large organization is not shaped by output. It is shaped by exposure, positioning, narrative, and political capital. Employee B understood this instinctively. Employee A never learned it. Multiply this pattern by 10 years, by 20, by an entire career. Then extrapolate across every department, every division, every level of leadership, and you get the modern executive class. Now, if you have made it this far, you already understand more about corporate reality than most people who have spent decades inside it. But the most important part of this video is coming up next. Because I have shown you how dark triad personalities rise, now I need to show you what they do once they arrive. And the truth is more damaging than most people realize. Because a dark triad executive does not simply cause harm to individuals. They reshape the culture of every team they touch. They rewrite the norms of what behavior is rewarded. They install patterns that outlast their own tenure. And they leave, in their wake, a corporate environment permanently more toxic than the one they inherited. Let me show you exactly how. The first thing a dark triad leader does upon arrival is claim allies and identify enemies. Not through overt loyalty tests. That would be too obvious. Through 100 small signals. Who gets included in inner circle lunches? Who gets copied on strategic emails? Who is invited to the offsite? Who is quietly excluded from information flows they used to receive? Within a few months, everyone on the team understands, without ever being told, who is favored and who is disposable. This is not accidental. It is a deliberate architecture of dependency. Because a dark triad leader thrives when their team is oriented around the question of their approval, rather than around the substance of the work. Employees stop asking themselves, what is the right thing to do? And start asking, what will keep me in the favored circle? The moment that shift happens, the leader has won. Because from that point forward, every team decision is filtered through the lens of the leader's presumed preferences. Not through analysis, not through customer needs, not through ethics, through politics. This is how dark triad leaders create cultures where obviously bad decisions get made quickly and unopposed. Because no one wants to be the person outside the favored circle. And raising an objection is the fastest way to end up there. The team becomes a mirror. And the mirror shows only what the leader wants to see. The second thing a dark triad leader does is claim credit and distribute blame. This is a pattern so consistent that organizational psychologists now use it as a diagnostic sign. When a team succeeds under a dark triad leader, the language of the leader shifts to the first person. My strategy, my decision, my leadership. The team is mentioned briefly, in generic terms, as if they were merely instruments of the leader's vision. When a team fails under a Dark Triad leader, the language shifts to the third person. They missed the mark. The team under-delivered. The execution was flawed. The leader remains conspicuously absent from the story of the failure. At first, this pattern seems too crude to work. Surely senior executives would notice. They almost never do, because they are getting the story from the person telling it, and the person telling it is a master of narrative control. Meanwhile, the team members themselves usually cannot object publicly, because objecting would mean confronting the leader, which would mean risking their careers, which would mean losing their income, which would mean upending their families' lives. So they stay silent. And the pattern continues. Successful outcomes get labeled as the leader's brilliance. Failed outcomes get labeled as the team's incompetence. The leader's reputation grows. The team's reputation degrades. Eventually, when enough failures accumulate, the leader is not fired. They are promoted to a different department where the entire cycle begins again. The third thing a Dark Triad leader does is systematically eliminate anyone who could threaten them. This does not mean anyone who challenges them openly. Open challengers are easy. They can be marginalized, mocked, or documented into oblivion. The real threats are more subtle. The person on the team who is genuinely more competent than the leader. The rising star whose reputation is growing faster than the leader can control. The senior colleague whose relationships across the organization run deeper than the leader's own. These people do not know they are threats. They are simply doing excellent work. But the Dark Triad leader identifies them within weeks. And then begins the quiet campaign. Small comments to senior stakeholders. Concerns delivered in confidence. Praise laced with subtle undermining. She's brilliant, but her judgment can be a little inconsistent. Feedback loops carefully redirected to make sure critical information flows to the leader first and to the rising star last. Over 18 to 24 months, the campaign works. The rising star becomes puzzled by their stalled trajectory. They cannot understand why their reputation seems to have soured. They begin to doubt themselves. Eventually, they either leave the organization voluntarily or accept a slow career decline. Meanwhile, the leader has consolidated their position. The person who could have replaced them is gone. The pattern is replicated with the next rising star, and the next, and the next. Over 5 years, the leader has methodically removed everyone who could have surpassed them. The organization has lost some of its best talent, but the leader has never been stronger. This is not paranoia, this is systematic. And every senior HR professional who has watched a career-long Dark Triad executive will tell you, in private, that they have seen this pattern play out in slow motion over and over again. The fourth thing a Dark Triad leader does is engineer plausible deniability into every dubious decision. They never make the questionable call themselves in writing. They never send the aggressive email. They never leave the fingerprints where they can be traced. Instead, they signal. A comment in a meeting, a raised eyebrow at a specific proposal, a pointed pause after someone mentions an idea, a carefully vague phrase like, "We need to think about how we handle so-and-so." The subordinates read the signal. They act on it. They do the aggressive thing. They send the difficult message. They make the risky call. They deliver the bad news to the doomed colleague. If it works, the leader takes the credit for the strategy. If it backfires, the leader expresses shock and disappointment that anyone acted so aggressively. They may even initiate a formal inquiry. The subordinate is thrown to the wolves. The leader's reputation for integrity remains untouched. This is why so many corporate scandals, when investigated, reveal a strange gap. The person who did the wrong thing is often not the person who directed it. The person who directed it is often nowhere near the paper trail. Their fingerprints have been carefully erased through the deliberate architecture of ambiguous instruction. This is not an accident. It is a skill. refined over years, perfected by the type of person who never intends to be caught holding the knife. Now let me address something that a lot of you are feeling right now. You are recognizing someone, a former boss, a current boss, a colleague, a leader at a company you once worked for, a person whose career you have watched from a distance with quiet confusion, wondering how someone so obviously hollow kept rising, kept winning, kept being celebrated. You are not wrong. You are simply seeing something clearly that most people around you have been trained not to see. The corporate world runs on a set of quiet agreements. One of the deepest of those agreements is that you do not openly discuss the psychology of senior leaders. You do not publicly question the personality of the person who signs your paycheck. You do not draw attention to the pattern. You are supposed to see the actions, not the architect. But once you have seen the architect, you cannot unsee them. And the question you are now asking yourself is the same question millions of intelligent employees eventually ask themselves. What do I do about it? Let me give you the honest answer. Not the inspirational one, the honest one. The first thing you do is stop trying to win a game the Dark Triad boss has been playing for 20 years. You will not out-manipulate them. You will not out-network them. You will not expose them through logic. You will not convince their peers to see what you see. You will not appeal to HR successfully, because HR exists structurally to protect the company from you, not to protect you from the company. You cannot fight them on their terrain. The second thing you do is take the emotional weight of the situation off your own shoulders. If you are the target of a Dark Triad boss, you may have spent months or years feeling like there is something wrong with you, like you must be missing something, like if only you tried harder, communicated better, worked longer, the situation would improve. It will not improve. Because the situation is not a communication problem. It is a personality problem. And the personality in question is not going to change. The moment you internalize this, the moment you stop taking their treatment of you personally, a strange freedom arrives. You can stop asking yourself what you did wrong, because you did not do anything wrong. You simply landed under a leader whose survival strategy requires targets, and you happen to be one. The third thing you do is document everything. Not for confrontation, for clarity. Because Dark Triad bosses gaslight. They will deny previous statements. They will rewrite the history of a project. They will claim conversations went differently than they did. Your memory, over time, will become soft under their pressure. Documents is not a weapon. It is an anchor. It keeps you tethered to reality when the leader is trying to detach you from it. Written notes, saved emails, timestamps, facts. You may never use them in a formal complaint, but you will use them every day to remind yourself that you are not losing your mind. The fourth thing you do is build your external gravity. A Dark Triad boss thrives when they are your entire professional universe. When your promotion, your reputation, your income, your sense of professional worth all flow through them. You have to slowly, quietly, systematically build a career center of gravity outside of their control. Relationships in other departments. Skills that make you valuable across the industry. Public work, writing, speaking, teaching, contributing, that establishes your reputation independently of any one manager. Recruiter relationships, peer networks, mentors elsewhere. The moment you have external gravity, their leverage over you collapses. Not because they no longer control your paycheck, because they no longer control your identity. And once they cannot control your identity, they cannot fully control you. The fifth thing you do, and this is the hardest one, is accept that leaving may be your only real victory. Because there is a specific mistake that intelligent, ethical employees make over and over again. They believe that staying and enduring is a form of strength. It is not. Sometimes it is, but often it is a slow erosion of the very things that make you excellent. Every month you spend under a Dark Triad leader, you lose something. Confidence, optimism, trust in your own perceptions, belief in the fairness of the world. Some part of the joy that made you good at your work in the first place. At some point, the calculation becomes clear. You are trading pieces of your soul for a paycheck, and no paycheck is high enough to justify that trade indefinitely. The bravest thing many intelligent people ever do is walk away from a role that is quietly killing them. Not because the work is impossible, but because the environment is toxic in a way that no promotion can cure. Leaving is not defeat. Leaving is oxygen. And you were not put on this planet to spend your finite years being systematically undermined by someone who sees you as a threat, an obstacle, or a tool. Let me leave you with one final thought. The reason the Dark Triad dominates the modern workplace is not because they are stronger than you. It is not because they are smarter than you. It is not because they work harder than you. It is because they play a different game, one that most ethical people refuse to play, even when they know how. And this is where the deepest philosophical question of your career emerges. Do you learn to play their game, sacrificing some of your ethical clarity to compete on their terrain? Or do you keep your integrity fully intact, knowing that this choice will cost you some measure of professional advancement? There is no universally correct answer. Every honest person has to decide this for themselves. But I will offer you this. The most successful people I have ever studied, the ones who reached high positions without losing their soul, did not choose between the two options. They chose a third one. They kept their ethical core untouchable, but they became fluent in the language of the game. They learned to self-promote without dishonesty. They learned to build political capital without manipulation. They learned to say difficult truths in ways that landed rather than exploded. They learned to make themselves visible without becoming performative. They did not become Dark Triad personalities. They became something more dangerous to Dark Triad personalities. They became ethical people who could no longer be outmaneuvered. That is the position you want to reach. It takes time. It takes deliberate learning. It takes the humility to admit that being good at your job is not enough, that the corporate world requires additional skills that most great workers have been trained to disdain. But once you develop those skills, while keeping your ethics fully intact, you become the rarest and most valuable creature in modern organizational life. A person of substance who is also a person of power. That is who the Dark Triad cannot ultimately defeat, because they cannot understand you. They cannot categorize you. They cannot use their standard playbook against you. You have integrity they cannot bribe, and competence they cannot match, and political fluency they assumed only they possessed. You are the check on their power that most workplaces have never had. Become that person, not because the workplace deserves it, because you do. If this video changed the way you see your career, hit the like button. It genuinely helps this channel reach the people who need this message most. Subscribe if you want more content that pulls back the curtain on the psychology of power, leadership, and human behavior. And in the comments below, I want to know, have you ever worked under a Dark Triad leader? What was the moment you realized what they truly were? In my next video, I'm going to reveal what happens inside a romantic relationship with a Dark Triad partner. The exact phases the relationship moves through. The specific psychological patterns that keep victims trapped. And why the aftermath of leaving one of these relationships is more devastating and takes longer to heal from than almost any other kind of loss. You do not want to miss it. Until then, stay awake, stay aware. And remember, the corporate ladder does not measure your worth. Do not let a broken system convince you otherwise.